My name is Sarah, and I'm 28 years old. Growing up, I was always the disappointing daughter compared to my perfect sister, Amelia. No matter how hard I tried, my achievements were never good enough for my parents. When I got accepted to my dream college, they refused to help, telling me I wouldn't be successful anyway. I proved them wrong by building a career on my own terms. But just when I thought that chapter was closed, they suddenly reappeared in my life with an outrageous request for $130,000 for my sister's wedding. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had to prove someone wrong. I grew up in a comfortable middle-class suburb just outside Boston, Massachusetts. Our neighborhood had those picture-perfect houses with neatly trimmed lawns and white picket fences. From the outside, we looked like the ideal American family, but inside our home, the reality was quite different. My father, James, was a successful business consultant who specialized in helping struggling companies turn their fortunes around. He was charismatic, confident, and commanding, the kind of man who dominated every room he entered. My mother, Diane, was a former beauty queen who had transitioned into a career as a real estate agent after marriage. She still carried herself with that pageant poise, always perfectly dressed and immaculately presented no matter the occasion. Then there was my younger sister Amelia, 4 years my junior, and the absolute light of my parents' eyes. From the moment she was born, it was clear she was special to them in a way I never was. Amelia had inherited my mother's striking looks and my father's natural charm. She was musically gifted, playing piano beautifully from a young age, and excelled at dance. By the time she was 10, she was winning beauty pageants all over New England, with my parents beaming proudly from the audience. I, on the other hand, was the studious one. I had always been drawn to books rather than ballet, to science rather than socializing. My idea of a perfect weekend was curling up with a good book or working on a computer program I was designing. This difference in our interests might not have been a problem in many families, but in ours, it created a chasm. "Sarah, your nose is always stuck in a book," my father would say with a disapproving frown. "You need to learn how to talk to people if you want to get anywhere in life." My mother would add, "Darling, intelligence is fine, but charm opens doors that brains can't. Look at your sister, she knows how to work a room." One memory stands out particularly clearly from when I was 14. I had just brought home my report card straight A's in every subject, including advanced placement classes. I placed it on the kitchen counter, a small spark of hope flickering that maybe, just maybe, this time they would notice my achievement. That same day, Amelia came home with her report card too. She had mostly B's, with a B- in art. When my father came home, he glanced at my report card, nodded briefly, and said, "Good job." But when he saw Amelia's, he made a big production out of taking the family out to dinner to celebrate her hard work, especially praising her for the B- in art because she was expressing her creativity. As we sat at that restaurant watching my parents fawn over Amelia, I felt invisible. It wasn't that I wanted them to love me more than her. I just wanted them to love me equally, to see value in my achievements too. Throughout high school, this pattern continued. I joined the robotics club, won the state science fair. With a software program I designed, became president of the math club, and maintained perfect grades. My parents attended none of my competitions or award ceremonies, always finding excuses about work commitments or Amelia's more important dance recitals. "You're just too bookish, Sarah," my father would say when I showed him an award. "The real world doesn't care about academic achievements. You don't have the charm or the people skills to truly succeed." My mother was more subtle but equally dismissive. "It's wonderful you're smart, dear, but that's not what makes a fulfilling life. Look at me, I wasn't the top of my class, but I found a wonderful husband and have a beautiful family." Even at my high school graduation, where I delivered the valedictorian speech that received a standing ovation from the audience, my parents seemed more excited about Amelia's solo in the choir performance that preceded it. I saw them recording her song on their phones, but during my speech they sat passively watching, no cameras in sight. Despite all this, I never gave up on my dream. From the time I was 12 and first learned to code, I knew I wanted to become a software engineer. The logic, the creativity, the problem-solving aspects of programming spoke to something deep inside me. When I worked on code, I felt alive in a way nothing else made me feel. It was the one place where my analytical mind was an asset rather than something to be corrected or ignored. As high school came to an end, I applied to several top computer science programs, hoping against hope that my achievements would finally be enough to earn my parents' support. The day my acceptance letter from MIT arrived was one of the most exciting moments of my life. I held that envelope in my trembling hands, barely able to believe that one of the most prestigious technical universities in the world wanted me. For a brief, beautiful moment, I allowed myself to imagine that this might be the achievement that would finally change everything. The day after receiving my MIT acceptance letter, I gathered my courage and approached my parents in the living room. My father was reading the Wall Street Journal while my mother scrolled through her phone, likely checking real estate listings. I cleared my throat, heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Mom, Dad, I have some news," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been accepted to MIT for their computer science program." My father lowered his newspaper, slightly peering at me over the top. "MIT, that's going to be expensive." My mother at least offered a smile. "Congratulations, dear. That's quite an achievement." Encouraged by her response, I continued. "I've been looking into the costs. With my scholarships, we'd need to cover about $30,000 a year. I know it's a lot, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and the career prospects after graduation are excellent." The silence that followed was deafening. My father folded his newspaper deliberately, setting it on the coffee table, before looking up at me with an expression I'd seen many times before, disappointment mixed with impatience. "Sarah," he said in that patronizing tone he reserved for when he thought I was being particularly naive. "Let's be realistic here. You won't be successful anyway. It's a waste of money." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd expected resistance, perhaps negotiation, but not such a blunt dismissal of my potential. "What do you mean I won't be successful?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother jumped in, her tone gentle, but her words no less hurtful. "Sweetheart, we're just thinking about what's best for you. Computer science is such a competitive field, and it requires certain social skills that aren't your strongest suit. Maybe you should focus on more realistic goals." "Like what?" I challenged, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. She exchanged a glance with my father before replying, "There are plenty of good local colleges with more suitable programs. Or you could take some time to think about what you really want. Maybe meet someone nice, settle down." "You mean get married? That's your solution, instead of pursuing my dream career." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father sighed heavily. "Look, Sarah, we're trying to save you from disappointment. The real world isn't like your books and computer programs. It's about connections, charm presentation. We're just not convinced this investment will pay off." As the conversation continued, it became increasingly clear that they had never intended to support my college education, at least not at a prestigious university pursuing a technical degree. The money they claimed was needed for other things, family expenses, their retirement planning, and, of course, Amelia's future. Speaking of Amelia, just 2 weeks after my MIT acceptance, I overheard my parents discussing sending her to Westfield Academy, an exclusive private high school with an annual tuition nearly equal to what they were refusing to pay for my college education. "Amelia has such potential," my father said. "This school will give her the connections and opportunities she deserves." My mother agreed enthusiastically. With her talents and the right environment, there's no limit to what she could achieve. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. While my potential was dismissed, Amelia's was worth any investment. But the true betrayal came a few days later when I accidentally discovered the truth about our college funds. I was looking for some tax documents my mother had asked me to file when I came across financial statements for education savings accounts. To my shock, there were two accounts, both with substantial balances. My parents had indeed saved for our college educations, but they were planning to redirect my portion to Amelia. Armed with this knowledge, but feeling more defeated than empowered by it, I made an appointment with MIT's financial aid office. The counselor was sympathetic, but realistic. The additional scholarships available wouldn't be enough. I would need to work multiple jobs while studying full-time to make ends meet. "It's going to be extremely difficult," the counselor warned me. Many students in your situation decide to defer or choose a less expensive option. I'll make it work, I replied with a determination born of hurt and anger. I have to. The day I left home was surreal. My belongings fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack enough for my tiny shared dorm room. My parents were home, but barely acknowledged my departure. My father gave me a perfunctory hug and said, "Good luck out there," as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than his daughter. My mother was slightly warmer, giving me a list of budget-friendly recipes and reminding me to dress appropriately for interviews. Neither of them offered to drive me to the bus station. The only genuine goodbye came from Amelia, who snuck into my room while I was doing a final check for forgotten items. "I'm going to miss you so much," she said, her eyes filled with tears as she hugged me tightly. At 14, she was old enough to understand the unfairness of the situation, but too young to challenge our parents' decisions. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "No matter what they say, I know you're going to be amazing." As the bus pulled away from the station taking me toward Cambridge and my uncertain future, I felt a strange mixture of terror and liberation. For the first time, I was entirely on my own with no safety net, but also free from the constant weight of trying to earn approval that would never come. What I didn't know then was just how difficult the path ahead would be, or that years later, those same parents who had deemed me unworthy of their support would return with demands of their own. My first year at MIT was the hardest year of my life. While most of my classmates were focused solely on navigating the notoriously challenging curriculum, I was juggling full-time studies with an almost impossible work schedule. My day typically started at 5 a.m., when I would drag myself out of bed to work the morning shift at Campus Brew, the coffee shop nearest to the computer science building. From 6 a.m. until 10 a.m., I would make lattes and cappuccinos for the very professors who would be grading my work later that day. After classes from 10:30 to 4, I would head to my job at the university library where I worked from 4:30 to 9 p.m. Weekends were devoted to my third job as a coding tutor for high school students, preparing for AP computer science exams. Home was a tiny apartment in a rundown building in Somerville, a 25-minute bike ride from campus. I shared the 2-bedroom space with 3 other students, all of us too poor to afford on-campus housing. My bedroom was actually half of the living room, partitioned off with a cheap curtain that did little to block light or sound. My roommates were nice enough, but we were all too exhausted most of the time to form more than superficial friendships. The physical toll of this schedule was substantial. Within 2 months, I had lost 15 pounds, my clothes hanging loose on my already slender frame. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under my eyes. I found myself nodding off during lectures, something that had never happened to me before. And several times I fell asleep at my desk in the library, waking up with keyboard imprints on my cheek. The breaking point came during my first semester finals. After pulling 3 consecutive all-nighters to complete a major programming project while still working my regular shifts, I collapsed during my algorithm design exam. I simply put my head down on the desk, intending to rest my eyes for a moment, and woke up 30 minutes later to a nearly empty classroom and a concerned teaching assistant standing over me. Professor Jackson, who taught the course, asked me to come to his office after I submitted my incomplete exam. I walked there in a daze, certain I had just destroyed my GPA and possibly my future at MIT. "Ms. Lawson," he said, when I sat down across from his desk, "I've been teaching here for 23 years, and I recognize the signs of a student who is working too hard outside the classroom. Would you like to tell me what's going on?" Something about his kind, no-nonsense demeanor broke through my carefully maintained composure. Before I knew it, I was telling him everything: the financial situation, my parents' refusal to help, the 3 jobs, the impossible schedule. Instead of the pity I feared, Professor Jackson responded with practical help. He arranged for me to take an incomplete in his course with time to properly finish the exam after winter break. He connected me with a better-paying research assistant position in the computer science department that would allow me to reduce my other work hours. Most importantly, he became a mentor, checking in regularly and providing the guidance and support my parents had withheld. "You have one of the sharpest minds I've encountered," he told me. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, least of all your parents." Even with Professor Jackson's help, the holidays that first year were particularly difficult. While other students went home to celebrate with their families, I remained in the nearly empty dorms allocated for international students and others who had nowhere else to go. The campus felt like a ghost town, the silence in the halls a stark reminder of my isolation. Amelia texted me on Christmas morning with a cheerful Merry Christmas, followed by photos of her presents and family celebrations. Conspicuously, she never mentioned our parents asking about me or expressing any concern for how I was spending the holiday. I responded with manufactured cheerfulness, not wanting to burden my younger sister with the reality of my situation. Despite these challenges, something unexpected happened during that brutal first year. I discovered my own resilience. Each obstacle overcome, each exam passed. Despite overwhelming odds, each month survived on my meager budget, built a confidence in myself that no parental approval ever could. By spring semester, I had found my rhythm and even begun to build a community. The coding club became my social outlet, a place where my analytical mind was an asset rather than a liability. For the first time, I found myself surrounded by people who thought like me, who valued the same things I did, who didn't try to change me. Lisa, a junior computer science major who became my first real friend at MIT, put it perfectly. The problem was never you, Sarah. You were just planted in the wrong garden. The real turning point came at the end of my freshman year, when Professor Jackson recommended me for a summer internship at DataStream, a rising tech company specializing in data visualization software. The internship paid enough that I could take a break from my other jobs and focus entirely on gaining practical experience. During that summer, I worked on a project analyzing inefficiencies in the company's core algorithms. What started as a simple assignment evolved into a significant optimization that reduced processing time by 27%. My supervisor was so impressed that he asked me to present my findings to the executive team. Standing in that boardroom explaining my work to seasoned tech professionals who were actually listening and asking insightful questions, I felt something shift inside me. This was where I belonged. This was what I was meant to do. And I had gotten here entirely on my own, despite rather than because of my family. When the CEO shook my hand afterward and said, "We'll be keeping an eye on you, Ms. Lawson. People with your talents are rare," I felt a validation that ran deeper than any approval my parents could have offered. That internship led to an ongoing part-time position during the school year and set the stage for what would become my career path. The struggle wasn't over. The next 3 years continued to be challenging, but that experience gave me something essential proof that my parents had been wrong about me all along. As I worked through my degree program excelling despite the obstacles, I occasionally thought about sharing my accomplishments with my parents. But the few times I tried sending emails about academic awards or internship offers, the responses were tepid at best. "That sounds nice, dear. Amelia just got the lead in the school play." My mother replied to news of my department award. My father's response to my prestigious second internship was simply, "Hope it pays well enough to cover your expenses." After a while, I stopped trying. I built my life separate from them, with friends who celebrated my successes and supported me through the inevitable failures. And while there was always a hollow space where parental pride should have been, I was learning to fill it with my own self-respect and the genuine connections I was forming. By senior year, when I was offered a job at Vertex Technologies, months before graduation, with a starting salary that exceeded my wildest expectations, I didn't even bother to share the news with my parents. The people who truly mattered in my life already knew and were celebrating with me. What I didn't realize then was that my parents' awareness of my success, or lack thereof, would become irrelevant. Life has a way of coming full circle, and the day would come when they would not only recognize my achievements, but try to capitalize on them in a way I never could have anticipated. Graduation day at MIT arrived with perfect Mayweather sunshine streaming down on the sea of black caps and gowns. As I sat among my fellow graduates listening to the commencement speech, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in what I'd accomplished, excitement for what lay ahead, and a lingering sadness for what was missing. Professor Jackson had offered to have his family host me for a celebration dinner, an invitation I gratefully accepted. His wife and teenage daughters had become something of a surrogate family over the years. Still, as I watched other graduates hugging their parents and posing for photographs, I couldn't help feeling the absence of my own family. Amelia had wanted to come, but was in the middle of final exams herself and couldn't make the trip. My parents hadn't even responded to the invitation. 2 weeks after graduation, I started my position at Vertex Technologies, one of the fastest growing software companies in the country. My starting salary of $95,000 a year felt almost unreal after years of scraping by on minimum wage jobs. The first time my paycheck was deposited, I stared at my bank account balance in disbelief. One of my first major purchases was my own apartment, a modest one-bedroom in Cambridge, but it was mine alone. After years of shared spaces with paper-thin walls and no privacy, having a place entirely to myself felt like the ultimate luxury. I bought furniture slowly, piece by piece, savoring the ability to choose items that reflected my taste rather than just what was cheapest or most functional. With financial stability came the opportunity to address other aspects of my life that had been neglected, including my mental health. On the recommendation of Lisa, who had remained a close friend after her own graduation, I started seeing Dr. Marissa Chen, a therapist specializing in family trauma and self-worth issues. It sounds like you've achieved incredible things despite significant obstacles, Dr. Chen observed during our first session. But success doesn't automatically heal the wounds of parental rejection. Those need to be addressed directly. Over the next year of weekly sessions, I began the painful process of unpacking my childhood understanding, the patterns of favoritism and emotional neglect, and learning that my parents' inability to value me wasn't a reflection of my worth, but of their own limitations. Dating was another area where these issues surfaced. My first serious relationship after college was with David, a charming marketing executive I met at a tech conference. He was attentive and affectionate, but as things became more serious, I found myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to discover some fundamental flaw in me that would turn his affection to disappointment, just as my achievements had never been enough for my parents. When he ended the relationship after 8 months citing my emotional unavailability, I wasn't surprised. I had kept part of myself walled off, protecting against an abandonment I viewed as inevitable. Dr. Chen helped me see this pattern. "You're still operating from the template your parents created," she explained. "You believe love is conditional on performance, and even when you perform exceptionally, it can be withdrawn without explanation." It took time and several more dating experiences before I met Jason, a software developer at a different company, who approached relationships with a refreshing directness. "I like you," he said on our third date. "Not because you're brilliant at coding, though, that's impressive. Not because you graduated from MIT or have a great job. I like you because of how your face lights up when you talk about solving a difficult problem, because you have strong opinions about the best way to organize code libraries, because you're kind to wait staff and remember details about my day." And his ability to see me and value me for exactly who I was felt revolutionary. For the first time, I found myself in a relationship where I didn't feel I had to earn affection through achievement or performance. Jason became my partner in the truest sense of the word, someone who celebrated my successes, but didn't base his regard for me on them. Professionally, my trajectory continued upward. My work ethic, honed through years of necessity, distinguished me among my peers. Within 3 years, I was promoted to senior developer, overseeing a team working on Vertex's flagship product. My big breakthrough came when I developed an innovative algorithm for data processing that became the foundation for a new product line. The project earned me an Industry Innovation Award and significant recognition within the company. As my career flourished, I maintained a disciplined approach to finances, remembering too well the precariousness of my college years. I lived well below my means, aggressively paying off my substantial student loans and building savings. By 26, I had paid off all my debt and saved enough for a down payment on a small townhouse in a desirable Boston neighborhood. The day I signed the mortgage papers becoming a homeowner should have been one I shared with family. Instead, I celebrated with Jason and a small group of close friends who had been my true support system. We toasted with champagne in my empty living room, sitting on the floor because furniture was still to come. To Sarah, Jason said, raising his glass, who built this life brick by brick through sheer determination and brilliance. Throughout these years, my contact with my family remained minimal. Amelia and I texted regularly and occasionally spoke by phone, but she was careful to keep our conversations separate from anything involving our parents. She had graduated high school and gone on to Brown University, where she was studying art history. From her occasional comments, I gathered that our parents continued to be actively involved in her life, attending her gallery showings and visiting regularly. I never asked about them, and she respected that boundary. Our relationship existed in its own bubble independent of our shared past. It wasn't perfect. I always sensed she felt torn between loyalty to me and to our parents, but it was the best we could manage under the circumstances. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I would wonder if my parents ever thought about me, if they ever regretted their decision, or felt proud of what I'd accomplished, despite their lack of support. But mostly I focused on the life I was building, a life that increasingly validated my choices and my worth. What I never expected was that after years of silence, my family would suddenly reappear in my life. Not with apologies or recognition of past wrongs, but with expectations and demands that would force me to confront everything I thought I had moved beyond. 5 years after graduating from MIT, my life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. At work, I had recently been promoted to lead developer, overseeing a team of 12. My relationship with Jason had deepened, and we were discussing moving in together. My townhouse was fully furnished and felt like a true home. While the absence of family connections remained a dull ache, I had largely made peace with it. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday in April, everything changed. I was working from home when my doorbell rang, an unusual occurrence in the middle of a workday. Opening the door, I found myself face to face with Amelia. At 24, my sister had blossomed into a stunning young woman. With her long chestnut hair and our mother's delicate features, she looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine. But what struck me most was the nervous tension in her posture as she stood on my doorstep. "Surprise," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can I come in?" I welcomed her, of course, but my mind was racing. Amelia and I spoke regularly by phone and text, but she had never visited me in Boston before. Something significant must have prompted this unexpected trip. After the initial awkwardness of showing her around my home and making coffee, we settled in my living room. Amelia twisted her hands in her lap, clearly building up to something important. "I have news," she finally said. "I'm engaged." She extended her left hand, revealing a diamond ring that caught the sunlight streaming through my windows. The stone was enormous, clearly expensive. "His name is William Preston," she continued. "His family owns Preston Development Group. We've been dating for about a year." I congratulated her, sincerely pleased to see the genuine happiness that shone through when she spoke about her fiancé. As she shared details about their relationship and how he had proposed during a weekend trip to the Hamptons, I felt a genuine connection with my sister that had been missing in our careful, curated phone conversations. After exhausting the topic of William and their relationship, Amelia fell silent, stirring her coffee absently. I sensed she was working up to the real reason for her visit. "Sarah," she finally said, looking up at me with an expression that immediately put me on guard. "Mom and Dad want to reconnect with you." The statement hung in the air between us. 5 years of silence, and now they wanted to reconnect. Not with a phone call or email, but by sending Amelia as an emissary. "Why now?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral with effort. Amelia looked uncomfortable. "They've been talking about it for a while. I think seeing me get engaged made them realize how much time has passed, how much they've missed." I didn't point out that my college graduation, multiple promotions, and home purchase apparently hadn't triggered the same realization. Instead, I asked, what exactly are they proposing? "They'd like to have dinner, all of us together. They want to meet Jason too." The thought of subjecting Jason to my parents, of watching them evaluate and likely find fault with this person who had become so important to me, made my stomach clench. But I could see how much this meant to Amelia, how desperately she wanted her entire family present for her wedding. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Amelia stayed overnight in my guest room, and by the time she left the next day, I had reluctantly agreed to a dinner the following month. Jason, when I told him about it, was supportive but concerned. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "You don't owe them a relationship just because they've suddenly decided they want one." His protective instinct touched me, but I had made my decision. "I'm doing it for Amelia," I explained. "And maybe for myself too. I need to know if I can face them as an adult on my own terms." The dinner was set for an upscale restaurant in Boston. As Jason and I entered, I spotted my family immediately. They had barely changed. My father, still commanding in his tailored suit, my mother elegant and poised, Amelia radiant, beside a tall, aristocratic-looking man who must be William. The initial greetings were strained years of absence, creating an awkwardness that even my parents' social skills couldn't fully smooth over. My father shook my hand as if I were a business associate. My mother air-kissed my cheek, commenting on how professional I looked. Neither made any reference to the years of silence or their absence from my life. As the evening progressed, my parents showed a superficial interest in my career, asking broad questions about what I did at Vertex, though it was clear they didn't really understand, or perhaps care about the technical details. They were more animated, discussing Jason's background, particularly brightening when they learned his father was a successful orthopedic surgeon. "A medical family," my mother said approvingly. "That's wonderful." My father turned to me with what I recognized as his networking smile. "Sarah, you're looking well. Seems like the tech industry agrees with you." "Yes," my mother added. "You've finally become quite presentable. That haircut suits your face shape much better than how you wore it in college." I nearly laughed at that. She had never seen how I wore my hair in college, having never visited me once. But I bit my tongue, reminding myself I was here for Amelia. When the conversation turned to Amelia and William's wedding plans, the atmosphere changed. My parents became animated, discussing venues, guest lists, and details with an enthusiasm that highlighted the contrast with their lukewarm interest in my life. "The Preston family has connections to the Rosewood estate," my mother said excitedly. "It's the perfect venue, so exclusive they rarely host weddings, but they're making an exception for William and Amelia." William, to his credit, seemed slightly uncomfortable with the fawning attention. "My parents are excited," he said diplomatically. "But Amelia and I want to make sure the day represents both families equally." My father clapped him on the shoulder. "That's very generous, son, but when you're marrying into a family like yours, certain standards are expected." As the evening wore on, it became increasingly clear that this wedding was being planned on a scale I hadn't anticipated. Every element discussed was lavish, from the custom-designed invitations to the week-long honeymoon in the Maldives. But it wasn't until dessert that my father finally revealed what I had begun to suspect was the real purpose behind this reconciliation. "Sarah," he said, his tone shifting to what I recognized as his business voice. "As you've probably gathered, this wedding represents a significant financial undertaking. The Preston family is contributing substantially, of course, but we're expected to match their investment in certain areas." I set down my fork, suddenly understanding with perfect clarity. "And what does that have to do with me?" My mother jumped in her voice, honey sweet. "Well, darling, we know you've done very well for yourself. Your father and I are approaching retirement, and with the wedding expenses—" "You want me to contribute to the wedding costs," I stated flatly. "We were thinking you might want to cover the catering and floral arrangements," my father said, as if this were the most natural request in the world. "About $130,000. The amount hit me like a physical blow. $130,000, almost precisely the amount they had refused to provide for my entire college education. "You're joking," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Not at all," my father replied, seemingly oblivious to the significance of the figure. "You're making six figures now, while we're approaching retirement. It's time for you to step up for family." My mother reached across the table to pat my hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Don't you want your sister to have her dream wedding? I looked at Amelia, whose face had drained of color. Her wide eyes met mine, and I could see immediately that she had no idea this request was coming. Jason's hand found mine under the table, a silent support as I gathered my thoughts. I wanted to explode to throw 5 years of accumulated hurt and anger across the table. But in that public restaurant, with Amelia looking mortified and William clearly uncomfortable, I simply said, I think it's time for Jason and me to leave. Sarah, be reasonable. My father started, but I cut him off. We'll discuss this another time, I said, standing up. Congratulations again, Amelia William. It was nice to meet you. As Jason and I walked to our car, the cool night air a blessed relief after the stifling tension of the restaurant, he asked quietly, Are you okay? No, I replied honestly. But I will be. What I didn't tell him was that beneath my shock and anger, another emotion was taking hold, a grim determination to finally confront the truth of my relationship with my parents, no matter how painful that confrontation might be. 3 days after that disastrous dinner, I called Amelia and asked to meet her alone. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe halfway between Boston and Providence, where she was still living while completing her master's degree. When she arrived, I could see the strain of the situation on her face. Always slender, she looked like she had lost weight in just the few days since I'd seen her last. The confident poise she had inherited from our mother was absent, replaced by a nervous energy as she slid into the seat across from me. Sarah, I am so sorry, she began immediately. I had no idea they were going to ask you for money. I would never have agreed to that dinner if I'd known. I believed her. Despite our different upbringings, Amelia had always had a kind heart. She had been a child during the worst of my parents' favoritism, too young to really understand what was happening or to challenge it. I know, I assured her. This isn't on you. Relief flooded her features, but it was quickly replaced by worry. They've been calling me, constantly asking if I've spoken to you, trying to get me to convince you to be reasonable, as Dad puts it. And what do you think? I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Amelia looked down at her coffee cup. I think it's awful. After everything, she trailed off, then looked up at me with tears in her eyes. William and I don't want this kind of wedding anyway. It's all for show for his parents and ours. If it were up to me, we'd have something small with just the people who really care about us. This confirmed what I had suspected at dinner. William had seemed uncomfortable with the lavish plans being discussed, and now it was clear Amelia wasn't entirely on board either. Have you told Mom and Dad that... She nodded miserably. They won't listen. Dad says it's about maintaining appearances, that connections made at this wedding could be valuable for everyone's future. Mom is obsessed with what the Preston family will think if we don't match their contributions. As we continued talking, Amelia revealed more about our parents' financial situation information that added crucial context to their outrageous request. After years of living beyond their means, supporting Amelia's activities, taking luxury vacations, maintaining their image, my parents were not in the strong financial position they projected. My father's consulting business had suffered during the recent economic downturn, and my mother's real estate commissions had been inconsistent. They remortgaged the house last year, Amelia confided. I only know because I overheard them arguing about it. They'd never admit it to anyone, but I think they're actually struggling. This information should have evoked sympathy, but instead it triggered a new wave of anger. All those years they had claimed they couldn't afford to help me with college while living a lifestyle they couldn't sustain. Amelia, I said carefully, what happened to the college fund? I found documents years ago showing there was money set aside for both of us. Her face fell. You knew about that. I only found out recently myself. Dad used your portion for investments that didn't pan out, and mine went mostly to Westfield Academy's tuition. There was barely anything left for college, which is why I needed scholarships for Brown. The confirmation of what I had long suspected should have been vindicating, but it only left me feeling hollow. It wasn't just that they had favored Amelia. It was that they had been dishonest about it, presenting their choices as financial necessities rather than deliberate decisions. After parting with Amelia, I needed time to process everything I had learned before confronting my parents. A week later, I arranged to meet them at their home without Jason or Amelia present. This conversation needed to happen directly with no buffers or witnesses. Their house looked exactly as I remembered it. The colonial facade perfectly maintained the garden meticulously tended. But now I could see it differently, understanding it as a facade in more ways than one, a veneer of prosperity covering financial instability. My mother answered the door, her smile tight with anticipation. "Sarah, darling, we're so glad you came. Your father is in the living room." I followed her through the familiar hallway, noting the same artwork on the walls, the same furniture arranged in the same configuration. It was as if time had stood still in this house while my life had transformed completely. My father stood as I entered, his posture stiff. "Sarah, can I get you a drink?" "No, thank you," I replied, taking a seat directly across from them. "I think we all know why I'm here. You've asked me for a significant amount of money for Amelia's wedding, and we need to talk about that." My mother started in with the same manipulative tactics she had always used. "We understand it's a large sum, but family supports family. After all we've done for you." It was that phrase that finally broke the dam of restraint I had maintained. "After all you've done for me," I repeated, my voice rising despite my determination to stay calm. "Let's talk about what you've done for me. You refused to contribute a single dollar to my education, telling me I wouldn't be successful anyway." My father's face hardened. "We were being realistic about your prospects." "No," I countered. "You were being cruel and playing favorites as you always had. I found the documents, Dad. I know there was money set aside for my education that you chose to use elsewhere." A flash of surprise crossed his face before he composed himself. "Investment decisions were made in the best interest of the family as a whole." "The family as a whole, or Amelia specifically?" I challenged. "Because from where I stood, it looked a lot like you had written me off entirely." For the next hour, years of suppressed hurt and anger poured out. I recounted instance after instance of their favoritism, their dismissal of my achievements, their absence during the most significant moments of my life. Through it all, they attempted to defend themselves, to minimize their actions, to reframe the narrative in a way that absolved them of responsibility. "We always believed in you," my mother insisted. "We just wanted you to be realistic. If you truly believed in me, you would have supported me like you supported Amelia. Instead, you left me to fend for myself. Do you have any idea what those years were like? Working 3 jobs while taking a full course load, nearly collapsing from exhaustion during exams, spending holidays alone because I couldn't afford a bus ticket home, not that I felt welcome anyway." My father shifted uncomfortably. "You clearly managed. Look at where you are now." "Yes, look at where I am now," I agreed. "I succeeded despite you, not because of you. And now you want to benefit from that success." As the conversation continued, it became increasingly clear that my parents were not capable of genuine remorse or even recognition of the harm they had done. Their worldview could not accommodate the possibility that they had been wrong, that their treatment of me had been unfair and damaging. The final revelation came when I pressed them on their current financial situation, armed with what Amelia had told me. Backed into a corner, my father finally admitted that they were indeed in significant debt, that the Preston family was expecting a wedding matching their affluent standards, and that they were desperate. "Your mother and I have worked our entire lives to maintain certain appearances, certain connections," he said, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. "This wedding isn't just about Amelia, it's about our legacy, about the doors it will open for all of us." "All of us, or just you and Amelia?" I asked quietly. He had no answer for that. As I prepared to leave, my mother made one last attempt. "Sarah, despite everything, we're still your parents. Doesn't that count for something?" I paused at the door, looking back at these two people who had shaped so much of my early life, both through their presence and their absence. "It should," I replied softly. "But you made it clear long ago that being your daughter didn't count for much with you. I can't change the past, and neither can you. What happens now depends on whether you're finally ready to acknowledge the truth and begin to repair what you broke. The money isn't the issue here. It never was." As I drove away from my childhood home, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The conversation had been painful but necessary. For years, I had carried the weight of their rejection, questioning my own worth because of their inability to value me. Now I understood with complete certainty that the deficiency had always been theirs, not mine. My parents had failed me, but in doing so, they had inadvertently given me something valuable, the knowledge that I could rely on myself, that my worth was not dependent on their validation, and that I was capable of building a life of meaning and purpose entirely on my own terms. What I still needed to determine was what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted with them moving forward, and how to support Amelia without enabling our parents' manipulative behavior. These were complex questions with no easy answers, but for the first time I felt equipped to face them honestly, without the burden of seeking an approval that would never come. In the days following my confrontation with my parents, I found myself in a strange state of emotional limbo. The long overdue conversation had been cathartic in many ways, finally giving voice to feelings I had suppressed for years. Yet it had also left me with difficult decisions about how to move forward, particularly regarding Amelia's wedding. Jason was my rock during this period, listening without judgment, as I processed the complicated mix of anger, grief, and relief that washed over me in waves. "What do you think I should do about the money?" I asked him one evening as we sat on the couch in my living room, takeout containers spread on the coffee table between us. He considered the question carefully, as was his way. "That depends on what feels right to you, Sarah. This isn't about what you can afford. It's about what message you want to send and what boundaries you need to establish." His insight cut to the heart of the matter. This wasn't a financial decision, but an emotional and psychological one. After several days of reflection, I came to a decision that felt true to my values while respecting the complex realities of family dynamics. I called Amelia and asked to meet with her and William together without our parents present. We met at a quiet restaurant near their apartment in Providence. William impressed me immediately with his genuine concern for both Amelia and the uncomfortable situation our families had created. "First," I began after we had ordered, "I want you both to know that my issues with our parents have nothing to do with my feelings for you, Amelia. I'm thrilled about your engagement and want to support your happiness." Relief washed over my sister's face. "That means so much to me, Sarah. I've been so worried this whole situation would damage our relationship." "It won't," I assured her, "but I need to be clear about what I can and cannot do." I explained my decision. I would not be giving our parents $130,000 or any amount for the wedding. I could not, in good conscience, fund a lavish event that neither Amelia nor William genuinely wanted, orchestrated by parents who had refused to support my education and were now trying to use my success to maintain appearances. However, I continued, "I'd like to give you a wedding gift directly." I named an amount $25,000 that was generous, but well within my means, and more importantly, came with no strings attached. "You can use it for the wedding if you choose, or save it for a down payment on a home, or anything else that would genuinely benefit your future together." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "That's incredibly generous, Sarah. But what about Mom and Dad? They're going to be furious." "That's between them and me," I replied firmly. "You didn't create this situation, and you shouldn't be caught in the middle of it." William, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "I want you to know that I've been uncomfortable with the scale of wedding my parents and yours have been pushing for. This might actually give us the leverage to scale back to something more meaningful." The conversation shifted then to what kind of wedding Amelia and William truly wanted, if they weren't trying to satisfy parental expectations. It was the first time I'd seen my sister speak with genuine excitement about her wedding day, as she described a smaller, more intimate celebration focused on personal significance rather than social performance. As our dinner concluded, Amelia hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for the gift, but for showing me it's possible to stand up for what you actually want." It was a profound moment, the recognition that my difficult journey might in some way be helping my sister navigate her own relationship with our parents, breaking cycles that had shaped both our lives. The conversation with my parents about my decision was predictably difficult. I delivered the news by phone, unwilling to subject myself to another in-person confrontation. My father's response was immediate anger. My mother's tearful accusations of selfishness and family betrayal. "This is your sister's special day," my mother cried. "How could you ruin it like this?" "I'm not ruining anything," I replied calmly. "I've given Amelia and William a gift they can use however they choose. What I won't do is fund an extravagant show designed to impress the Prestons and maintain your social standing." My father's voice was cold. "After everything we've sacrificed for you." "Dad," I interrupted, "we both know that's not true. You made your choices years ago about where to invest your time, attention, and money. I've made peace with that. Now I'm making my own choices based on my values, not yours." The call ended poorly with my father hanging up after delivering a final barbed comment about ingratitude. I had expected nothing less, and while their reactions still hurt, it no longer had the power to devastate me or make me question my worth. Jason found me staring out the window after the call ended, my phone still clutched in my hand. "That bad?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "About what I expected," I replied, leaning into his embrace. "They're incapable of seeing anything from my perspective." He rested his chin on top of my head. "You know, there's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. The way your parents treated you was never about you. It was about them. Their limitations, their values, their insecurities. You were just a child trying to find your way in the world with the tools you had." His words resonated deeply with what I had been learning in therapy, the gradual process of separating my sense of self-worth from my parents' inability to recognize it. "I think that's true," I said slowly. "And maybe that's also true for them. Their behavior now, this desperation to create a certain image through Amelia's wedding, it's not really about her or me. It's about their own need for validation, their own fears about status and appearance." Understanding this didn't excuse their behavior, but it did help me see it more clearly, and with a compassion that felt healing rather than enabling. The weeks leading up to Amelia's wedding were tense. My parents maintained minimal contact with me, communicating primarily through stiff formal emails about logistical details. I learned through Amelia that they had indeed scaled back some of the more extravagant elements of the wedding, partly due to financial necessity, and partly because she and William had found the courage to insist on a celebration that reflected their actual wishes, rather than parental expectations. As the wedding day approached, I had another significant conversation, this one with Dr. Chen during our regular therapy session. "You've been navigating an extremely challenging family situation," she observed. "How are you feeling about attending the wedding?" I considered the question carefully. "Nervous," I admitted. "It will be the first time I've been in the same room with my parents since our confrontation. But also determined, I guess. Determined to be there for Amelia without letting my parents' behavior affect me." Dr. Chen nodded. "That's a healthy perspective. Remember that you can't control how they act, only how you respond." "I've been thinking about forgiveness a lot," I told her. "Not in the sense of excusing what they did, but in the sense of letting go of the anger so it doesn't consume me." "Forgiveness is a process, not an event," she replied. "And it's something you do for yourself, not for them. It doesn't require reconciliation or pretending the harm didn't occur. It just means you're choosing not to let that harm continue to damage your present and future." The wedding itself was beautiful, though not in the over-the-top way my parents had initially envisioned. Held at a historic estate with gardens that were in full bloom that May, it struck a perfect balance between elegance and genuine warmth. Amelia was radiant in a gown that suited her perfectly, and William looked at her with an adoration that was unmistakable. I maintained a polite distance from my parents during the celebration, exchanging necessary pleasantries, but avoiding any substantive conversation. They did the same, greeting me with stiff smiles when protocol required it, but otherwise focusing their attention elsewhere. The one genuinely moving moment came during the reception, when Amelia sought me out for a private word. Finding a quiet corner away from the festivities, she hugged me with unexpected fierceness. "Thank you," she said, her eyes bright with emotion. "Not just for being here, but for everything. You stood up to them, and it gave me permission to stand up for myself too. This wedding happened on my terms because of you." I blinked back, tears touched by her words, and the recognition of how our shared history had shaped us both in different ways. "I'm so proud of you, Amelia. You found someone who truly values you for exactly who you are. That's worth celebrating." As I watched her rejoin her new husband on the dance floor, I felt a sense of closure beginning to form. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still unwritten. The patterns that had shaped our family for so long didn't have to continue into the next generation. In the months following the wedding, I took several significant steps toward creating the future I wanted. Jason and I decided to move in together, blending our lives in a way that felt natural and right. I met with a financial advisor to establish a college fund for any children Amelia and William might have, ensuring that the next generation would have educational opportunities without conditions or comparisons. Perhaps most meaningful to me, I reconnected with Professor Jackson, who had been such a pivotal mentor during my college years. Over coffee in his cluttered office, I shared the idea that had been forming in my mind, creating a scholarship for students who, like me, were pursuing technical degrees without family support. "That's a wonderful idea, Sarah," he said, his eyes crinkling with the same warmth I remembered from years before. "The impact could be tremendous for the right students." With his guidance, I established the First Generation Achievers, scholarship designed specifically for students who were the first in their families to attend college or who lacked traditional family support. The application process included an essay about overcoming obstacles, and I committed to personally mentoring each recipient. My therapy sessions with Dr. Chen became less frequent as I continued to heal and integrate the painful aspects of my past into a cohesive narrative of resilience and growth. In our final regular session, she asked me what I had learned from the entire experience. "I've learned that success isn't just about achievement or financial security, though those things matter." I reflected. "It's about building a life aligned with your values, surrounded by people who see and appreciate your authentic self. And it's about using whatever privilege or advantage you gain to create opportunities for others facing similar struggles." The truth was, being underestimated had become my greatest motivation. Every time my parents had dismissed my potential, they had unknowingly fueled my determination to prove them wrong. But now, having established my worth beyond question, I was free to define success on my own terms, not as a reaction to their doubt, but as an authentic expression of my values and vision. As for my relationship with my parents, it remained cordial but distant. I had accepted that they might never be capable of the genuine recognition or apology I had once craved. Yet in letting go of that expectation, I had found a freedom I never anticipated, the freedom to appreciate what they had inadvertently given me, the strength that comes from building something meaningful entirely on your own terms. Sitting in my home office one evening, looking at a framed photo of Jason and me at a tech conference where I had been a featured speaker, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been harder than it should have been, but it had led me exactly where I needed to be. Have you ever had to prove someone wrong about you? What kept you going when others didn't believe in you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by other people's limited vision. Remember, sometimes the greatest success is showing the world and yourself exactly what you're capable of, especially when no one else saw it coming. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it gives you strength for whatever challenges you're facing right now.